Very good morning once again, and many thanks for staying with us right here on the #1 breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. Very good morning to Richard Todwong. Yes, Honorable. He is the new Secretary General of the NRM Secretariat. He shall be deputized by Honorable Rosemary Namayanja. Yes, that is the deputy of the NRM Secretariat. That's the latest we are getting right here on Morning at NTV. I do not know the fate of Emmanuel Dombo. He was the communications director. Emmanuel Dombo, give me a call and let me know what your fate is. Are you still the communications director? All right, let's get into the Kickstarter conversation of the day. We are focusing on World Day Against Elimination, that is World Day Against Child Labor, that is actually observed every 12th June. Yes, and in 2021, ahead of this occasion, we'd like to highlight some of the challenges that have persisted, some of the achievements that have been achieved in this fight against the elimination of child labor. And I do have the Federation of Uganda Employers Executive Director, Douglas Opio. He's with me here in studio. And I also do have Jacqueline Banya from the International Labour Organization. The gentleman and lady shall expand more on some of the achievements, yes, that have been birthed during these challenging times of trying to eliminate child labor. And also we shall be taking a look at some of the challenges that have persisted and made it hard for our stakeholders, that is the International Labour Organization, which has been financing the work of the Federation of Uganda Employers all the way from 1999 in their fight in ending child labor. They've been helping them with financial and technical support. But how far with the progress? Is the COVID-19 pandemic threatening to whitewash or undo all the good work that we have actually achieved all these years? And the answer is yes. But let's expand more with the experts, Douglas Opio and Jacqueline Banya. Very good morning and many thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Yes, let's first take the perspective of the International Labour Organization, which has been offering technical support and financial support to the Federation of Uganda Employers. Yes, the theme for this year, Act Now and Child Labour. What is this perspective of the International Labour Organization on this particular issue, ending child labour? Give us an analogy on this.
Thank you so much, and thank you, viewers. This really, you've said it well.
Indeed.
Act Now, End Child Labour. This is the theme, and the International Labour Organization uses the World Day Against Child Labour as an important advocacy tool to highlight the plight of child laborers worldwide. And the UN declared this 2021 the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. Not by accident,
Indeed.
Because this is an issue that has worldwide, globally, warranted urgent action amidst the COVID-19 pandemic or crisis. And you know currently what is happening in our country. The COVID-19 pandemic is threatening to reverse the trend, to reverse the progress that has been made over the years. So for us at the International Labour Organization...
We would like to know, before COVID-19, we are sure that there were other factors that were exacerbating this issue of child labour. So before we get onto this COVID-19 pandemic, there are other factors that made it hard to do away with this problem. What are they?
Quite a number of factors. Of course, we know we always look at the root cause.
Indeed.
We have root causes and there are other causes.
Yes.
The root cause seems to be poverty.
I see.
Livelihoods. At the bottom of it all, everything zeroes down on livelihoods. Basic affordability.
Indeed.
For education, for health, you know, services which go beyond a holistic approach when you look at a child.
I see. When parents can't afford all these basic amenities, they send their children onto the streets to make a living.
Unfortunately, they are forced to participate in together alongside their parents, especially in agriculture, where the sector, which seems to be the worst hit in terms of not only the danger that it poses, but also the magnitude of the problem seems to be higher in the agricultural sector. And you know, with subsistence, we have a lot of children that work alongside their parents, and it becomes inevitable for survival. And the parents use the labor force of these children, and alongside the parents, not knowing that this is something that is jeopardizing their future, they end up doing beyond necessary and are exposed to harmful substances. Some of them are chemicals that are dangerous, like in spraying, and some of them in lifting heavy loads. So when you look at the entire supply chain in agriculture and where children are involved, there are a lot of risks, health and safety issues that jeopardize their safety and their health and physical moral development.
And their human
that is
rights
the issue.
to education and so
exactly,
forth.
Exactly. So for the ILO, what is happening is that apart from setting the standards, it's not enough. So we work hand in hand with the Federation of Uganda Employers,
Indeed.
with the government, with the workers, with the other stakeholders,
Indeed.
to see that they within their mandates as Federation of Uganda Employers, for example. I know he's going to throw more light on that.
Indeed, he has to.
So you see that it's a collective effort. There's no one single stakeholder that can deal with this problem of child labor. But you said, what are the causes? So poverty is one of them. We know that it's not only affordability. All these are related. It's linked up to other factors. And they could be also that the social protection system that we have cover is not sufficient or adequately covering all the you know, in terms of extension. The scope of coverage is quite limited. So families that are not able to access some services are not covered. And not only that, we also have an issue to do with population. Our population, you know, in Uganda, the fertility rate is quite high, so sizes of populations of households.
It has increased by 3.9%.
Families, yeah, it's quite high. So that also is a threat in a way, because if the bigger the size of the family, the more the burden for the families. And of course, you know, we have other pandemics like the HIV/AIDS that has played a key role in this, whereby in the past we had household child-led households, and you see the effect. They are forced to get into child labor early
because of the circumstances.
Yeah, it becomes a vicious cycle, because you find child laborers, then they produce child laborers, and perpetually this whole thing of getting out of breaking the cycle of poverty. We rely on education, and education is the tool that we know if you inject in it, you can break the cycle. But we've had a challenge with education itself. As you know now, what is happening with education, it is limping. For over a year, you know, since I cannot stop mentioning the fact that education is the tool or the weapon, is the principal route throughout.
Please reiterate, indeed.
Yeah. But we cannot no longer claim to say that it's going to be our principal route out of this problem of child labor if the children are out of school, actually. For most of last year, most of them are out of school.
And they can become a security problem at a later stage when they grow up.
Precisely, precisely. So what I'm saying is that the school is a healthy environment. It keeps them away from the work.
I see.
The school is the workplace for the children. But if they're out of school, what else are they doing out there? So if they're not kept in school and learning to be productive adults in future, so that's the problem precisely. When schooling is not on, like right now, they're back at home. And for the large part of last year, they were not at home. So therefore, they were more vulnerable. Their vulnerability is reduced if they're in a learning environment. That is the point now.
Let's take a look at the variables. Are these challenges that you just mentioned, the factors that you just mentioned, largely isolated to Uganda, or are other children in other jurisdictions grappling with the same factors? Poverty.
This is not only Uganda. This is something that is cutting across.
I see.
Poverty is cutting across, and beyond Uganda, the region, and the globe is the issue. The root cause of it is poverty. And when you look at evidence-based solutions, research conducted all point to the fact that livelihoods improvements is at the heart of this.
So if you empower households, you're actually alleviating this problem by 80%.
Absolutely.
Let's talk to the Federation of Uganda Employers, that is the Executive Director, Douglas Opio. Douglas Opio, you've been working with the International Labour Organization all the way in 1999. Very good work you've been doing. They've been offering financial and technical support. But let us in on the progress of this work that you've undertaken since 1999. Can you say that you're registering progress or positive results, or are you registering a downward trend, largely occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic?
No, I would say up until we entered the pandemic situation, we had largely registered very significant progress.
Give us a genesis from 1999.
From 1999, our focus then was largely in agriculture.
Indeed.
Because we viewed agriculture as the highest risk area. And our target was in the worst forms of child labor. But over the years, we have broadened beyond the space of agriculture into other sectors, construction, mining, and even services, informal businesses as
You don't believe, but I've seen these children in stone quarries in Kabale.
True.
As young as 6.
True, true. Those are the ones we classify as the worst forms of child labor.
I see.
Because they are not only dangerous to their emotional well-being, it's dangerous to their physical well-being, it's dangerous to to their health, but evidence also shows us that it compromises their ability to earn more in the future. Essentially, when you engage a child right now at work, you are likely to reduce their ability to earn. And the cycle that Jack is talking about, then that cycle can't be broken. You basically put somebody in a trap. In other words, a child who has gone through child labor is likely to have children who will also go through
so the cycle of poverty
So
and child labor continues.
You never break that at all.
Indeed.
So with the ILO, we have been doing a lot with the companies, looking at their supply chain. Because most of the established companies, of course, they don't want to be associated with child labor. It's bad for their brand. But along their supply chain, there are people who are utilizing child labor, people who supply them, whether they're supplying them food, whatever supplies they're bringing to the companies, maybe they're using child labor. So we have been supporting companies, first of all, to ensure that within their operations, there are no children involved.
The supply chain doesn't involve tomatoes that have come from a farm that is being operated by children. I hear you very well. So as an employer who is buying tomatoes that are coming in from a farm operated by children, you are exacerbating child labor.
Exactly.
Unknowingly.
Unknowingly. And that's where the issue of due diligence comes in. Now,
Indeed.
speaking about ILO support, right now we are conducting a survey which is geared towards developing a due diligence toolkit that employers then would utilize to analyze within their supply chains, do they have potentials for child labor? It might not even be existing, but in the future, is it likely to be a weak point?
You can see the signs
lead you to
precipitate.
child labor. So we are trying to work with the employers first to do a comprehensive look within the workplace, both in terms of their policies, but also in terms of their practices, to ensure that children are not involved at all.
What we do know right now is that what has largely curtailed your efforts in ending child labor is the COVID-19 pandemic. But since 1999 and before the pandemic, what were some of those factors that made it so hard for you to actually execute your work?
In the past, and this is where as a country we have seen some progress, is poverty. In the past, that was the main driver. Why parents, no parent is happy sending a child to work, but conditions, the circumstances in which they are, forces them to use their children for work. And that's down to poverty. Over the years, from 1999, that time it was rather serious. The poverty levels were quite high. It went down significantly just to about 19. Now it's trying to rise up again, but
to 21.
To 21. But ordinarily, that was the principal problem. And then, because of that, children had to prioritize whether should I take a child to school or I actually should use them to earn a living for now. In other words, sacrificing future consumption for the present. Because the present matters more. It's about survival. But also around that time, we had a new government policy that was being launched, the UPE in 1997.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. So UPE was also a direct response to this.
It was a catalyst.
Yeah, was a catalyst because many parents were saying, I can't afford to pay school fees. And at the beginning, many were completely against that policy. They thought it was something terribly wrong because they were saying, just go to school. It doesn't matter whether the classrooms are there or whatever. But at that point, that's what we needed. We needed, as much as children possible, children to be in school, whether they're studying under a tree, whether they're not having adequate facilities. That was a second level matter. But first was to ensure that they go to school. Once they're in school, and over the years we have seen the infrastructures have improved. But at that time, people were studying basically under trees, and that helped us in a way in the elimination of child labor.
And indeed, many young children have been able to achieve a primary education. But what we do know is that secondary schools have been largely unable to absorb all those children into the secondary education system. Many of them are actually falling off the wagon and going back into child labor at the age of 14. Yes.
And that's why we have been engaging from the Federation with the government on the second level requirement for education.
Indeed.
The basic level is learning how to read and to write.
Indeed.
But the second level is being able to have a skill. Maybe I'm a tailor, maybe I'm a carpenter, maybe I'm a cook or a chef. So what we have been engaging the government on and is the technical and vocational education and training. So that if I finish P7, I can actually go and acquire skill. And that skill can be utilized for me to have a decent livelihood, to have a decent job. So
instead of dropping out.
yeah, instead of dropping out. Actually, the terminology dropout is used quite frequently because you don't have a skill. But if you went to school and actually acquired a skill, why should you be called a dropout?
Douglas Opio is the Executive Director, Federation of Uganda Employers. We also have Jacqueline Banya from the International Labour Organization. We've been talking about how poverty largely occasioned most of the problems we've been seeing, especially in exacerbating the issue of child labour from 1999 up to before the pandemic. Do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has actually plunged more Ugandans into poverty, which will later on exacerbate this problem of child labour? Your perspective as ILO.
The answer is a big yes. And what I was mentioning earlier on is that this year, for the 12th June, we are launching a new global report, global estimates, that will give us a good assessment of how the pandemic has affected or the pace of progress that is being made. And it's going to be launched on 12th June. And for now, I cannot speak of it, but I know the report is going to be out, and it's good to give us evidence based on, this is joint effort with UNICEF, with the ILO.
Yes.
So it's one of the highlights for this World Day. And I must tell you that really, without even doing research, you can already see. You can tell that there is definitely a negative impact in terms of, child labor. More children have been forced. We've seen some media reports of children actually into the streets. And like I already mentioned, once education is not on, you know that all the children are, what safeguards do you have to ensure that, they're in a learning environment? Even if you make them learn from in the households, reading materials online, not every child has access to such kind of facility. And that's the big challenge we have. And so definitely to answer you, the answer is yes. And from the ILO's perspective, this joint effort with UNICEF and ILO is going to give us the estimates and probably the assessment of how far the progress has been retracted, and then also the other unprecedented effects on economic scene, as the director for the executive director of Federation of Ugandan Employers has highlighted. The economic crisis has accompanied it, and we know that as long as this remains the status, chances are that we're going to have a long, far-reaching impact that we may not measure today, but over the years, there's that danger we foresee. Although we don't want to be prophets of doom, we see that there's a serious battle. Everyone is seeing now that the age bracket that we thought was protected from COVID is no longer protected. These are the children.
The trend is different.
So their health, the trend is different. So their health is at stake. And that opens another dimension. How do we deal with, first of all, access to education, then access to health services for them? So those are some of the challenges that we are battling with. So up until the global estimates that are going to be released will come out, and I think that it will throw more light, and therefore devising of strategies, new strategies, how to deal with it. But already the debate that is going on is how to join efforts with other agencies. That's UNICEF is working very closely with ILO, so is IOM and other UN agencies, joining efforts in the different respective mandates that they have. So on this international year for the elimination of child labor, we want to see what the international community, together with for us in the case of, we work with national governments on the ground through our technical cooperation, they say projects like he's mentioning. We think that there is hope. There is hope, but this hope, we cannot lose hope, definitely. Hope never runs dry.
Douglas Opio, let's talk about the role of government. The stimulus packages that did not actually go a long way in helping small, medium-sized enterprises resuscitate themselves. When you talk about SMEs, I don't know why people don't talk about parents who are operating this business, and they're the parents. So if I'm a parent and I'm operating a small business and then I didn't get any stimulus package to resuscitate the business, I'm largely at home. I do not have work. So I'll be forced to send my child back onto the streets. Do you think this was largely occasioned, the problem we are dealing with, by the government itself over its laxity to help these businesses or parents actually stay afloat, who in turn would have supported their children? Do you think that was the, where the government dropped the ball? the stimulus package and helping SMEs stay afloat?
I think the government showed its commitment right from the beginning. The main concern that I see, which is not just for the government but for all
But
of
none
us,
of the SMEs, Douglas, has received this money.
we can't say none because the funds were actually available. The first one was a joint fund from EU and the government of Uganda. It was disbursed through UDB, directly targeting the worst affected sector, which was tourism and hospitality. The SMEs in that area actually received the money. The second package, we are talking of a budget of $1 trillion shillings that the government allocated. Part of it is within this budget, which is just going to be read as well. But previously, disbursements have been done. But the problem is simply so big that reaching everybody with the cash will take time. Even in developed economies, even in the US now, people are discussing about the second disbursement to small and medium enterprises. So the government, I see a will, I see a commitment. You have heard in several presidential addresses a clear commitment from the head of state telling us funds will be available, allocating it to Uganda Development Bank.
Indeed, $1 trillion shillings was earmarked. They approved 455 billion, but only 444 billion is in UDB. And if you are not actually getting money above 100 million, they won't give it to you. So how many SMEs have business capital of 100 million? That's why we are saying this stimulus package actually did not go a long way in helping the parents who are operating those small and medium enterprises.
Just for information, there are other options as well. There's funding that the government has placed with Postbank. So anybody who is receiving less than 100 million actually doesn't have to go to UDB, but has to go to Postbank. Their mechanism for disbursement, some are being disbursed through Microfinance Support Center, and Microfinance Support Center as network across the country. So the mode of disbursement, not everybody should go to UDB. Otherwise, disbursement becomes problematic. The numbers, UDB wouldn't be in a position to manage that. But the Microfinance Support Center, the Post Bank, the other banking entities, Stanbic has just started an innovation fund as well. NSSF is starting iInnovator. So there are a lot of efforts within this economy to support SMEs.
And then do you think there will be more poverty? That's what we were discussing right here. The fact that SMEs have not been supported. So many of the parents will grab on there will be more poverty, which in turn forces parents to send their children back onto the streets. We are dealing with a second wave. You have new guidelines that have been expedited, meaning if I was a taxi driver and a parent, I can only operate in Kampala. I can't go to Gulu anymore. So the cash flow has actually reduced. And if I have 20 children, I'll look at the 10 actually going onto the streets to make some money. Don't you think this is going to exacerbate this problem that we are dealing with?
I agree. It's going to exacerbate it, especially in the short term.
I see.
Yeah, and that's where
if you do not increase.
comes in. But in the medium and the long term, people readjust. Businesses readjust as well. And you might have seen interesting stories, even NTV reporting some teachers making chapatis and all those. People readjust.
And saying they don't want to go back to the school system because
they don't want to go. So
killing.
In the short term, it seems like a death sentence, but it's not a death sentence at all. People will eventually find their footing, and the economy will rise again. We have seen far much worse depressions in the past, even recently, the one which didn't affect us much, the one of 2008. But it was a serious problem for the global economy. But over time, economies pick up. The same, I agree, for Uganda.
Indeed. Jacqueline Banya, you have 8,666 Ugandans who vacated this country in March. There are reasons. The COVID-19 pandemic impact and its effects was so immense they couldn't stay in the country. I'm thinking some of these were parents, so they vacated the country. Do you envisage a situation whereby more Ugandans will be vacating this country and then leaving children behind who are actually grappling with child labor?
Well, it's hard to predict that because you see the COVID-19 is everywhere. It's all over the world. And
according to your estimates, are you seeing migration of people from one jurisdiction to another looking for labor?
This is something that has happened and been happening. And the trend, I don't know whether it may be reversed. It's not, I think it increasingly, I could be giving a personal opinion, increasingly Ugandans are beginning to realize that, you can make it even at home. And some of them instead are returning. And I do not want to speculate on this, but certainly this migration has been not because of COVID. Even when you look back, it's mostly economic.
Right now they are saying it is COVID because in February you had 5,000 people leaving. Now in March you had 8,000. It's 666. All of them are saying it is COVID. We can't make a living in this country. The restrictions that are also coming make it difficult for them to work. So they are like, let's go to the Middle East. Many of them are hit there.
Well, of course, that can be an excuse, but I think at the bottom of it all is still economic. If you dig down,
all right.
The COVID seems to be just one of the.
All right. All right.
So the thing I wanted to highlight to you is that for ILO, action pledges, in being the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, we've encouraged all member states to come up with an action pledge. What action are you going to take which you can measure at the end of the year? And we are working with the Federation of Ugandan Employers, with the government of Uganda, Ministry of Gender, Labour, Social Development. They have made action pledges, which are going to be globally different stakeholders, the employers, the workers, the governments, even CSOs have made action pledges. What action, specific actions, are they going to take this year that they will measure at the end? And I would like our ED for FUE can highlight a little bit, because I know the government has launched a very important framework. The National Action Plan on the Elimination of Child Labor is the action pledge to operationalize it.
Jacqueline Banya from ILO, thank you very much. Douglas Opio, let me give you 1 minute so that you can give us your parting shots, please. Your message to the government and other policymakers.
Thank you. To the government, I think let's continue to work as a tripartite. Let's join our effort. Child labor requires all of us to do our best. But also this year we are committing in terms of action pledges as the Federation for us to help employers develop workplace policies. Workplace policies that help them to eliminate child labor.
Indeed.
Not only within their workplaces, but across the entire value chain.
Indeed.
So,
Douglas Opio is the Executive Director, Federation of Uganda Employers. He was not alone. We also did have Jacqueline Banya from International Labour Organization. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to us about this very pertinent issue ahead of World Day Against Child Labour on June 12th.
Thank you,
all right. I'll be talking to you about the action pledges on Monday. Jacqueline Banya, if you can also be kind to show up on Monday, we can expound more on what will be discussed on Saturday. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
And of course, through the glass window of this studio, I can already see Susan Kaiser. I can already see Peter Chambad, with whom we are going to be having a conversation about, yes, financing the budget through 1, financial markets, and 2, yes, taxation. We'll be right back.